Hello, friends, and welcome back to Malicious Compliance Stories. Our first story today is about a kid who worked so hard his boss got promoted for it. For 4 years, he was the night shift powerhouse, keeping the restaurant alive, but when a new manager decided to cut costs by cutting his hours, the whole place fell apart. Fast. But before we begin, best way to support our channel is to leave comments, like, and subscribe with the turned-on bell so you don't miss the new video every single day. Here we go. I'm not paying some kid that much overtime. From the age of 16 to 20, I worked at a 24-hour fast food place. The kind of joint where the fryers never cool down, the soda machine never stops hissing, and you learn everything there is to know about humanity at 3 a.m. After 4 years there, I was really good at what I did, to the point where if someone called out or if the store was short-staffed, I could run the entire place solo for hours with barely a drop in speed or customer satisfaction. I knew the whole routine. Every machine, every rush pattern, basically I was the unofficial backbone of the graveyard shift. When I was 19, my grandfather got sick. And not take it easy for a few weeks sick, this was serious, life-changing stuff. I adored this man, and being able to help him became the center of my world. My manager at the time was amazing. We were close, and he understood how important my grandfather was to me, so we worked out a deal that helped both of us. He scheduled me a lot. I was essentially on call for any shift he needed covered. Mondays, our busiest days, I would sometimes work a straight 24-hour shift. Yep, a full day. And it worked because for about 8 of those hours, I'd be completely alone doing the work of 3 people without missing a beat. Because of all that, I regularly earned 10 to 15 hours of overtime a week, sometimes more. Now here's the funny part. My overtime actually saved him money. One person getting paid time and a half was still cheaper than hiring and paying multiple new employees. It boosted his numbers, his profit margin, and his reputation with corporate. And once the store started outperforming every other location in the region by a solid 15%, corporate gave him a promotion to regional manager. Big raise, big office, big deal. In return, I got a raise and, more importantly, 1 full week off every month to go visit my grandfather and help take care of him. The extra money also let me chip in for his treatments and medications. It felt like everything was working, like maybe luck had finally decided to be on my side for once. Then everything changed. When my boss became regional manager, a new general manager took over the store, and this guy was a walking dumpster fire. The kind of manager who thinks being loud is the same as being competent. My old boss explained our agreement to him, the overtime, the flexible schedule, the week off each month, and the new GM immediately scoffed. "That's stupid," he said. "I'm not paying some kid that much overtime." My old boss just shrugged because, honestly, he had the receipts. He knew the numbers proved our arrangement worked, and if the new GM torpedoed the store's performance, that would just make him, as the regional manager, look like the hero who'd stepped in. The new GM cut my weekly hours down to around 30, but still scheduled me to work solo shifts and overnight 24-hour shifts. So I was working nightmare hours, but getting paid way less. And he refused to honor the week I needed every month to visit my grandfather. That was the breaking point. I could handle bad bosses, stupid customers, fryer burns, all of it. But not being allowed to see my grandfather while he was getting worse? Absolutely not. So I quit. Not dramatically, just a simple 2-week notice, but the fallout was spectacular. Within a month, the store's performance tanked so badly it became one of the worst in the entire region. Not district, region. Profits dropped below the next lowest store by 15%. In other words, the new GM didn't just ruin a good thing, he crashed it straight into the ground, set it on fire, and blamed me for not sticking around to be exploited. Corporate fired him. Meanwhile, my old manager called me later, laughing his butt off, and told me the GM tried to claim my quitting caused the collapse. Sure, buddy, the store that thrived on the back of one overworked teenage workhorse fell apart because that workhorse finally walked out the door? Shocking. Nothing dramatic, nothing explosive, no revenge plot. I just left a bad situation. But watching karma speedrun his downfall from a distance, that was the funniest part of all. Most business chains don't hire leaders, they hire jerks with egos. Even the ones that aren't a-holes are often still terrible because they aren't trained properly. Being a manager isn't just about knowing how to do the paperwork, it's mostly about how to effectively use and work with your subordinates. And our second story. My grandma's revenge cake was 80 years in the making. My grandma and I were laughing about this the other day, and she asked me to post it here. So I was visiting my grandma in June of 2020. My grandma's birthday's in July, and we were chatting about what birthdays were like when she was a little girl. She told me that her birthday was close to her grandfather's birthday. As a result, the family would always have one celebration for both of them. Already a bummer, but here's the kicker. Grandma was, and still is, a sweet tooth and wanted cake for her birthday, but her grandfather wanted watermelon as his birthday treat. Since he was older, the family said he got to pick. For years, Grandma was sharing her birthday with someone who wasn't even born on the same day, and she didn't even get cake on her birthday because of it. Now, I love to bake and decorate cakes. I'm no professional, but I've made some pretty good cakes over the years. I pointed this out to Grandma and asked if she'd like a cake that looks like a watermelon for her birthday this year in order to stick it to her grandfather. Grandma asked if that would be difficult, and I honestly replied that it wouldn't be. Once she was certain it wouldn't bother me to do so, she got very excited and agreed. I got to work. I ordered a dome pan, which sadly was smaller than I anticipated, so the cakes came out small. But this was 2020, so it wasn't like I was baking for many people anyway. When it arrived, I made 2 dome-shaped white cakes. Then I mixed up a light green frosting and a pinkish red frosting and applied them. Black sprinkles made the seeds, and I added green frosting gel and smoothed it in for the watermelon stripes. Grandma was super happy when I brought them over. As we ate, we laughed about how her grandpa's bones were probably rolling in their grave and how he was throwing a fit to anyone who'd listen to him up in heaven. Both mental images made my grandma even more excited. In the end, I said, "Oh well, you can apologize to him when you get up there." Grandma replied, "I have no intention of doing so. If he brings it up, I'm going to tell him that he owed me." Again, not sure if this counts, but Grandma feels like she was avenged. This absolutely counts, and it's one of the most heartwarming and clever forms of revenge imaginable. You didn't just give your grandma a cake, you gave her back a piece of her childhood and allowed her to rewrite a decades-old memory with joy and laughter. And our next story. The night our barbecue had an unexpected and unwanted guest. The neighborhood Karen who showed up to a barbecue with empty containers. After the whole disaster with my entitled neighbor, Elaine, I made a point not to gossip about her to anyone. Not because she deserved the courtesy, she didn't, but because I didn't want to be the new neighbor who immediately starts talking trash. I figured I'd keep my head down, settle in, and let people form their own opinions. Turns out they already had. A few weeks after moving in, my next-door neighbors, John and Carol, invited me to a small backyard barbecue. Super casual. Everyone brought a dish, people chatted about lawns and leaky gutters. It felt like the nice, normal suburban evening I'd been hoping for. Toward the end, as folks were gathering their dishes, we suddenly heard loud knocking at the backyard gate. Not the door, the gate. Like an Amazon driver possessed. We all turned to look. Of course, it was Elaine. She was standing there holding a bag full of empty Tupperware, smiling like she was about to make a hostage negotiation charming. She announced she'd rang the front doorbell, but no one answered, so she just decided to come around back. Very serial killer energy, but okay. Carol started to stand, but John, in full neighborhood patrol mode, put a hand on her arm and said, "Sit down." He walked to the gate like a bouncer who's ejected the same drunk lady 5 times this month. "Elaine, can I help you?" She beamed. "I wanted to join the party. It smells amazing." John stayed stone-faced. "It's a potluck, and it's almost over." Carol, being polite, added, "Did you bring something?" Elaine held up her empty containers like they were invitations. "Well, no, but I'm sure there's plenty left." John's eyebrows said everything. "Not happening." "We're cleaning up," he replied. "You need to go home." And unbelievably, she tried to push the gate open while John was holding it closed. For a solid 30 seconds, she was wrestling the gate like she thought she could physically force her way in and fill those containers with other people's food. When she finally realized she wasn't getting past John, the immovable object, she stomped back to her house. The moment she was gone, I said, "Okay, what was that?" And that's when Carol unloaded the neighborhood archives. According to them, Elaine has a long history. She shows up uninvited to people's houses, pushes her way inside, eats everything she wants, and then packs leftovers to take home, opens fridges, pantries, even after people tell her no, insults people's homes, too clean, too cluttered, weird vibe, made creepy comments to at least 2 husbands, and she never brings a dish to potlucks, ever. One neighbor said Elaine called her teenage daughter anorexic, Another said Elaine tried to flirt with her husband while simultaneously insulting their decor. And the kicker, she never invites anyone to her house, claims it's because of COVID, which the neighborhood politely pretends to believe, even though everyone else moved on years ago. They're all convinced she just doesn't want anyone to see the inside. I just feel that she could be kinder to people and not treat them like they exist for her convenience. She isn't entitled to other people's things. She isn't poor. She isn't struggling. Maybe we should have a conversation with her husband? What kind of person shows up to other people's homes with containers? The most powerful thing you can do is to continue to build genuine relationships with the other neighbors. A united front that doesn't engage in her drama, doesn't feed her entitlement, and calmly reinforces boundaries is the only language people like this eventually understand, even if they never truly agree with it. And our last story. I demolished our family home while my brothers were on vacation. My parents died 4 months ago. First my mother, and then only 3 weeks later, my father. Both deaths were from long-standing health issues and old age, but losing them back-to-back like that gutted me. Anyone who's buried both parents knows how surreal that silence is afterward, how the house feels like it's holding its breath. There are 3 of us children, my older brothers, 46 and 47, and me, 38. And to put this gently, my parents spent their entire lives feeding my brothers' egos 3 meals a day. Whatever they wanted, they got. Whatever mess they made, my parents cleaned it. And as my parents aged, became frailer, slower, and more tired, my brothers only became more demanding. They pushed boundaries, threw tantrums at any hint of change, and treated any request for basic decency as an attack. My parents, who deserved peace in their final years, instead lived with tension and fear inside their own home. I always assumed, like everyone else, that my brothers would inherit everything when our parents passed. That was the unspoken rule of the family, the boys first, me second. So when I found out the house and part of the money were left to me, I was stunned. My parents left a letter, a long one. In it, they apologized, really apologized, for having spent decades catering to my brothers and allowing things to become so lopsided. They thanked me for supporting them financially the last 15 years, for being the only one who stepped up when things got hard. And because of all that, they left me the house. The $525,000 in insurance money was to be split evenly 3 ways, so $175,000 each, but the house was mine because they said it was the only tangible way they could even begin to repay me. They even wrote that they knew it still didn't come close to the amount of time, money, and emotional energy I'd spent on them over the years. My plan was simple: use my inheritance to bring the house up to code. It's old, it's tired, and it needed serious work. I wasn't planning some luxury renovation, just fixing structural issues, updating wiring, upgrading insulation, repairing the roof, the basics. My brothers had different priorities. First, they had zero intention of helping with the house, not physically, not financially, not even emotionally. They stayed exactly how they'd always been, entitled, loud, lazy, and arrogant. They refused to pay a cent toward utilities, maintenance, or repairs. I kept covering everything, and I simply couldn't afford to keep carrying 2 grown men who refused to lift a finger. Second, their inheritance money evaporated in record time. Cars, Vegas trips, gadgets, expensive clothes. They burned through $175,000 each in less than 4 months. They were gleeful about it, posting pictures online, bragging to family, acting like they'd won the lottery instead of receiving the last gift our parents ever left them. Meanwhile, I was trying to budget responsibly to fix the home they thought they had a lifelong right to squat in. I asked them to move out more times than I can count. Calmly at first, firmly later. They refused every single time. They said it was their house too, despite the legal paperwork and the will clearly naming me as the sole beneficiary of the property. Eventually, I hit my breaking point. Last month, while they were on a cruise, paid for with their dwindling inheritance, I made a decision. I hired movers, packed every bit of their belongings, and rented 2 storage units. Not only that, I paid 6 months in advance so they wouldn't immediately be on the street. And then I called the contractor and told him to begin work. My brothers came home from their vacation expecting to step back into their usual freeloading routine. Instead, they walked into a full-blown construction zone, half the house demolished, walls open, their stuff gone. They blew up my phone, calls, texts, voicemails, hundreds of them. I didn't answer once. Then came the extended family, cousins, aunts, uncles. Suddenly, I was the villain. You made your brothers homeless. Your parents would be ashamed. How could you do this to family? Funny how none of them had anything to say when my parents were being run into the ground by those same brothers. I'm exhausted. I'm sad. But I'm also relieved. Because the truth is simple. I've supported my brothers my whole life, emotionally, financially, practically. My parents supported them until their final breaths. And it was never enough. They're not helpless. They're entitled. And this was the first time in their lives that the consequences finally caught up. I don't regret it, not anymore. Your parents made it clear that the house was yours, and they left it to you for a reason. So you haven't disappointed your parents in any way. Your brothers were abusive to your parents for years, and now want to continue that tradition with you. Your relatives are free to house your brothers if they're concerned about them. Hey guys, thank you all for watching the video. I'll see you in the next one.